Chapter 1. A Harsh Welcome. Diego stepped off the bus carrying a small bag on his shoulder. Inside he had a few clothes, a wallet with enough money for 2 days, and a piece of paper with a name and address. The name belonged to a man he had never met, an old friend of his uncle who might offer him a job. In such a big city, even a small chance was worth taking. The air smelled of gasoline and fried food. People rushed past him, speaking loudly and moving in different directions. Tall buildings of glass and steel surrounded him, a stark contrast to the dusty roads of his hometown. For a moment, excitement filled him. This was a place where dreams could come true. But first he needed work. Diego spent hours walking, asking for jobs at construction sites, restaurants, and markets. Each time the answer was the same: "We're not hiring. Try somewhere else." By the afternoon, his stomach was empty and worry set in. Had he made the wrong choice coming here? Then luck struck. A small restaurant needed help unloading a delivery truck. Diego quickly agreed. He carried heavy boxes of vegetables, sweat dripping down his back. When the work was done, the owner handed him some money, his first earnings in the city. Relief washed over him. He could buy food. He had money. Maybe tomorrow he would find a real job. As night fell, he searched for a cheap place to sleep. The streets became darker and more unfamiliar. Suddenly, a hand gripped his shoulder. "New in town?" a man asked. Diego turned to see a man in a dirty leather jacket grinning at him. His yellowed teeth and the 2 men standing behind him made Diego uneasy. Before he could respond, a fist struck his ribs. Pain shot through his body as he collapsed. Hands searched his pockets. His money and ID were gone in seconds. "Welcome to the city," the man sneered. Then everything faded to black. Chapter 2. Learning the Rules. Diego woke up in an alley, his body aching from the attack. A man stood over him, arms crossed, watching intently. Diego tried to sit up, but the pain was too strong. A bottle of water lay next to him. He grabbed it and drank, his throat parched. "Who are you?" Diego asked, his voice hoarse. The man didn't answer right away. He studied Diego as if deciding whether he was worth helping. He was tall, with a serious expression. His messy hair and worn-out clothes suggested he had fought hard to survive. "My name's Mateo," the man finally said. "You should thank me. I could have left you there." Diego glanced around and saw a group of men sitting by a fire at the end of the alley. Mateo nodded toward them. "I'm giving you a choice." "A choice?" Diego asked, confused. Mateo crouched beside him, his tone firm. "You want to survive here? Then learn the rules." "What rules?" Diego asked. "Rule number 1, don't trust anyone. Not even me," Mateo said. Diego frowned. "And the second rule?" "Never stop moving," Mateo replied. His voice was cold, sending a shiver down Diego's spine. Chapter 3. The Dark Deal. Diego could barely breathe as the door slammed shut behind the 2 men. The smell of blood and gunpowder lingered in the air, making his stomach turn. He wanted to run, to escape as fast as possible. But where could he go? He had no family here, no friends, no safety net. The city was nothing like he had imagined. Mateo stood frozen, staring at the body on the floor. His eyes flickered between Diego and the corpse, as if unsure of what to say or do next. Finally he spoke, his voice shaking. You saw that, didn't you?" Mateo asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Diego nodded slowly, his throat tight. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Mateo replied quickly, as if trying to convince himself. "But you've seen the price of failure here. It's not just money, it's life. If you want to stay alive, you need to learn how to play the game. There's no other way." Diego swallowed hard, trying to push the image of the dead man out of his mind. He wasn't sure if he was ready to hear what Mateo had to say, but he had no choice. If he wanted to survive, he had to understand the rules, no matter how dangerous. Mateo stepped behind the counter and grabbed a bottle of whiskey. He poured 2 glasses and pushed one toward Diego. Drink. You'll need it. Diego hesitated for a moment, then took the glass. Maybe it would dull the fear, or maybe he already knew he had lost a part of himself to the city. So, what's the game? Diego asked, his voice rough. Mateo leaned in. The city has 1,000 ways to break you. Some are obvious, like that guy back there. But the real danger is the quiet ones, the people who pull the strings from the shadows. If you get caught in their web, you won't see it coming until it's too late. Chapter 4. The Price of Survival. Diego's vision swam as he struggled to his feet, his head throbbing. Each breath came in short, ragged gasps as he tried to make sense of the chaos around him. The alley was dark and suffocating, the glow of distant city lights barely visible through the thick smog. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the sound of footsteps, heavy, deliberate, and closing in fast. A shadow moved ahead. Mateo. His grip was firm as he yanked Diego forward. Move, he ordered, his voice tense. Diego stumbled, his legs unsteady beneath him. Fear clawed at his mind. Who was chasing them? What? Was this a setup? Had Mateo betrayed him? The fear in Mateo's eyes just before everything had gone dark. It was impossible to ignore. They rounded a corner and ducked into another alley, this one narrow and eerily silent. Mateo pressed Diego against the cold metal of a rusted dumpster. The air was thick with the stench of sweat, garbage, and something burning in the distance. Diego barely caught his breath before whispering harshly, "What the hell is going on? Who are those men? Why are they after me?" Mateo peeked around the dumpster, scanning the alley before turning back. His jaw was clenched. This isn't random. Someone knows you're here, and they don't want you going any further. Diego's stomach twisted. Oh, I don't know anyone in this city. That's the problem, Mateo muttered. You don't need to know them for them to know you. You stepped into something bigger than you realize. Diego shook his head, frustration boiling over. I didn't ask for this. I just needed a job. I just needed to survive. Mateo gave a bitter chuckle. And you think you're the only one? Everyone in this city is trying to survive. The question is, what are you willing to do to make sure you do? Distant voices cut through the night. Diego tensed. They're looking for us, Mateo said. We need to move. Now. He led Diego through a winding maze of alleyways, the city pulsing with distant sirens and the hum of life beyond the shadows. Diego had dreamed of a fresh start here, but now the city felt like a beast, waiting to devour him whole. They stopped at a rundown door, nearly hidden along the back of a crumbling building. Mateo knocked twice, short, deliberate taps. The door creaked open. Inside, the dim light barely revealed the figures lounging in the shadows. Their faces were unreadable, their eyes dull with exhaustion. No one spoke as Diego stepped in, but he felt their silent stares. Judging. Measuring. Mateo motioned him forward. Come on. We can't stay out there. Diego's gaze flickered around the room. The people here, slumped against the walls, murmuring in hushed voices, looked like they had been through too much. Were they like him once? Had they come to the city searching for a better life, only to be trapped in something far worse? Mateo's voice broke the silence. You want to understand this city? He exhaled slowly. The people who run things here, they make deals with blood. They don't care who you are or what you want. If you're in their way, they'll erase you. And that's exactly what they're trying to do to you. Diego felt his chest tighten. He had known the city was dangerous. But this was different. This was something darker. Mateo leaned in, his tone lower. I can help you. I know people who can get you out of this mess. But nothing comes free. His expression hardened. You'll owe them. And when the time comes, they won't care what you've lost. They'll take what they're owed. Diego's hands trembled. Every word Mateo spoke tightened around him like a noose. He wanted to believe he had a choice, that he could still walk away. But deep down he knew better. His eyes flicked back to the people in the room. Some of them had likely faced the same decision. Had they hesitated? Had they told themselves they could escape before realizing the truth? What's the price? Diego asked before he could stop himself. Mateo's smirk disappeared. Everything. Before Diego could respond, the door banged open. A man stepped inside, his presence suffocating. He was tall, his smile practiced but hollow. Diego felt his pulse spike. "This is your last chance," the man said, his voice smooth but edged with quiet menace. "We've got work for you. All you have to do is accept the deal." Diego's heart pounded. The words weighed heavy in the air. He turned to Mateo, searching for an answer. But Mateo's face gave nothing away. There was no turning back. "Do you want to survive?" Mateo murmured. Diego swallowed hard. He wanted to say no. He wanted to run. But he couldn't. The city didn't work like that. If he refused, there would be no second chances. "I'll do it," he whispered. The man's smile widened, but his eyes remained cold. "Good. You've made the right choice. But remember, nothing comes without a price." As the door shut behind him, Diego felt the weight of his decision settle in his chest. He had chosen survival. But at what cost? Chapter 5. The Price of Power. Diego clutched the briefcase tightly as he stepped out of the warehouse and into the night. The city stretched before him, vast and indifferent. His mind raced with questions, but one thing was clear: this job wasn't just a job. It was a test. The address Hugo had given him was on the far side of the city. Diego kept his head down as he moved through the streets, blending into the sea of people. Every face he passed felt like a potential threat. Every shadow seemed to whisper a warning. He turned a corner and nearly collided with a familiar figure. Mateo. Mateo's eyes locked onto the briefcase, his expression unreadable. "So, they've got you running errands now?" Diego hesitated. "It's just a delivery." Mateo scoffed. "Nothing is just anything in this city." He studied Diego for a moment before lowering his voice. "Do you even know what's inside?" Diego shook his head. "They told me not to open it." Mateo exhaled sharply. Of course they did. He glanced around before stepping closer. "Listen, if you want to survive, you need to start asking the right questions. You think this is just about making money? It's about power. Control. And once you're in, getting out isn't so simple." Diego tightened his grip on the case. He knew Mateo was right. But what choice did he have? Mateo sighed, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a small slip of paper. "If things go wrong, find me." He pressed it into Diego's palm. "Just be careful." Diego nodded, tucking the paper away before continuing down the street. The weight of the briefcase felt heavier with every step. At last he reached the address. A rundown apartment building. He hesitated at the door before knocking twice. A man answered, his face partially hidden in the dim light. Without a word, he took the briefcase, opened it, and examined its contents. Then he looked up, his sharp eyes studying Diego. "You did good," the man said. "Tell Hugo the job's done." The door shut before Diego could respond. As he turned to leave, a sinking feeling settled in his stomach. He had completed the task. But deep down he knew, this was only the beginning. Chapter 6. The Final Desperate Move. The city had become a trap. Diego could feel it closing in, tightening around him like an iron cage. He had come here to escape poverty, to build a better life. But now he wasn't running toward a future. He was running from his past. They had found him. He sprinted through the back streets, his breath sharp and uneven. His body ached from the last beating, but he had no time to rest. Marco's men were after him, and if they caught him, there would be no mercy. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about survival. The briefcase job should have been simple. Pick up the package. Make the delivery. Prove his loyalty to Victor's syndicate. But the moment he had opened it, Diego realized he was in over his head. It wasn't just cash inside. It was evidence, documents, names, details that could bring Victor's empire crashing down. And Diego had done the one thing no one ever did in this city. He ran. A shadow moved at the alley's entrance. Diego pressed himself against the wall, barely breathing. "Check the train yard," one of Marco's men said. "He's got nowhere else to go." Train yard. Sofia. The only person left who hadn't turned on him. Unless. Diego gritted his teeth and pushed forward. If Sofia had betrayed him, it was already too late. If not, she was his only chance. The train yard. The train yard stretched before him. Rusted, abandoned, silent. Should have felt safe. It didn't. Then he saw her. Sofia stood near an old cargo train, her hood pulled up, shifting nervously. "You made it," she whispered. "We don't have much time." Diego took a deep breath. "You said you could get me out." She hesitated, too long. His stomach clenched. Then footsteps. He turned just as figures emerged from the shadows. Marco's men. Sofia's face crumpled. "I didn't have a choice," she murmured. Diego didn't wait for an explanation. A gunshot cracked through the air, striking the metal train beside him. He threw himself behind cover, heart hammering. They had him. His eyes darted up. A ladder led to the roof of a rusted train car. It was a risk, but better than staying put. He climbed, his muscles burning. From the top he spotted it, a gap in the fence leading to the back streets. Then, "Enough running, Diego." The words hit him like a hammer. Standing near Marco's men was Mateo, his mentor. The man who had taught him how to survive. And the man who had just handed him over. Chapter 7. The Price of Freedom. Diego's chest tightened as he stared down at Mateo. "Why?" His voice barely carried over the night air. Mateo's expression was unreadable. "I warned you, kid. This city doesn't forgive." Diego's mind raced. Mateo had saved him once. Had been the only one to look out for him. And now. Marco stepped forward, smirking. "You should have stayed in line, Diego. Victor wanted you back. Hugo. He wanted you dead. Me. I just want my money." Diego clenched his fists. This was never about money. The briefcase had exposed something bigger. He wasn't just a loose end, he was a threat. He could feel the weight of the city pressing down. The betrayals. The choices. One last move. "You want the money?" Diego said. "Fine. I'll take you to it." Marco tilted his head. "Smart. But I don't need you alive to find it." He pulled a gun. Mateo moved. Fast as a shadow, he knocked the gun aside. A shot fired into the night. Everything happened at once. Diego didn't hesitate. He ran. The city blurred past him. He barely felt the ground beneath his feet. A gunshot rang out behind him. Someone shouted. He didn't look back. He reached the fence, forcing himself through. Pain shot through his body, but he kept going. He didn't stop until the sounds of the train yard faded into the night. 1 week later. The city stretched before him, golden in the morning light. Diego sat on the rooftop of a rundown apartment, watching. Waiting. Mateo was gone. Sofia had betrayed him. Victor's empire was still hunting him. He had won. And yet he hadn't. The past wasn't done with him. A knock at the door. Soft. Hesitant. Diego froze. Another knock. Then, a voice. "Diego, it's me." A voice that shouldn't exist. A voice that should have been dead. Diego's fingers curled around the knife on the table. His pulse pounded. Slowly he stood. And opened the door.